Okay, this is going to be the case 3 demonstration. It's a pretty straightforward case. So I'm going to come up to File, New Project, start from a patient CT scan, and this will be listed under case 3 DICOM zip. We'll go ahead and OK this. And I'm not going to limit the field of view other than maybe this distal portion. Generally, when it looks like this, that's about an 8x8 field of view. I find that that works pretty well and doesn't bog down the machine. And as you can see here, it loads pretty quickly. So, mandibular case, always the first thing that I'm going to do, really regardless of the case type, is I'm going to set my panoramic curve. And so for starters, if you need to move this up, remember right and left mouse button can bodily move anything. So I'm going to stretch this onto the back of the mandible and grab that node, stretch this one back. That looks good. And then we could do the auto nerve mapping or the manual. Let's just do one of each. So if I'm going to do the auto nerve mapping, I can go ahead and get my view centered on mental foramen. Go to +N, which is nerve, and say detect nerve, and it'll tell me to drop a point inside the mental foramen. So just click right there, and as you can see, the software did pretty good right through here, but it did get a little bit off. I can see the canal tracking up this direction, and as you can see right here, it did get a little off. Now you could go through the process of correcting that. I generally just find it to be a pretty quick process to just manually map the nerve, and so that's what I'll show here. I'm going to go to the slice view, which is this black and yellow button that turns it from a composite, conventional pan looking view to one like this where we've got just a single slice through the mandible. And so what I want to do is grab these nodes one by one and drag them buccal or lingual until I can see the canal through its entire length. And now this one is interesting because I only had to really touch a single node, and you can see it got the entire canal in view. Usually you'll have to go through and do each one individually, but this worked really well. So once you have that, you can come up and say add nerve, and then just click your way down the canal. And each point you drop or do a left click, it's going to add a point. And then as you get to the foramen, slow down. When you see it up here in your cross section, click once at the mouth of the foramen, one more time out in space. Deactivate the red button, otherwise it's going to click or continue dropping points the next place you click. So deactivate the red button. If you needed to fine tune any of these nodes, you can, but this should be good. I will lock that, and now our nerve is mapped. The next thing is we're going to import the STL model. So File, Import STL. This is going to be case 3 gingiva. And remember, this is matching teeth that the software will default to. Let's just do it and see if it gives a good stitch. Again, I oftentimes will just get out of the wizard and go straight to the manual stitching by points. But when this works, it's really, really nice. So not trying to put exact points on the exact same position, they just need to be on the same tooth. Okay? And I'm doing that by pushing shift and then left clicking to drop a point. So let's click a line, see how it does. And so it's hard to tell from this view whether or not that's going to be an ideal stitch. It's obviously close. Let's click OK and then analyze it in the software. So two places I'm going to do that. One is the cross-sectional view. And as I scroll through here, I should see this tight adaptation. And this one is looking pretty darn good. Maybe ever so slightly off right here. Can you see the difference? How that's starting to get off a little bit towards the distal. Let's go ahead and look at it in the axial slice. And so again, the cusp tips are not disappearing and reappearing at the exact rate I'd like to. Now in the anterior, everything looks great, but it looks like it's tilted up off the model a little bit in the posterior. So I'm going to restitch that manually. Before I do any manual stitching, I always want to isolate the jaw. That's done in your surfaces panel. So this model, click Click on your CT surface, isolate, and then click the mandible. And that will get rid of the maxilla, assuming you don't have the patient in occlusion during the scan. Back to model manipulation, we'll choose points, align, and it's going to bring up the window that has both models, and we can pick the corresponding points from one to the other. Maximize this window, orient the models in the same position, about the same size. That way your mind doesn't play tricks on you when you're picking these points. And you're going to go for maybe 6 to 8 of these. And all I'm doing is holding down the shift button and left clicking to drop a point. You could also do that by turning on the dropper up here, but I like to use the shift button because it'll make it easier to orient your models. Now let's see if I improve the stitch in this axial view. Now you notice that the model outline disappears at the exact same rate as the CT scan. So it wasn't off by much at all, but it was a tiny bit off. So you really need to appreciate how to evaluate whether or not you've got a good stitch or not. Once I've done that, I don't need the CT surface turned on anymore, so I go to the surfaces panel, uncheck visible. Now we're ready to place a tooth, so plus tooth, and I'm going to choose this lower right first molar. I can drop it into any view, and once I get it roughly in position, I'm going to do the fine tuning in this 3D window. Okay, so grab the widget, rotate it down that way. You can grab this dot that sticks out to the side and stretch the tooth laterally. If I grab the blue ring, I can bring it more into alignment there and then pull it into arch orientation. So that looks really good. Right click the tooth, lock it, and that's done. Now you're ready to place the implant. So plus implant. And with this one, let's go with the Biomax 4.3 by 10. Excuse me. In the mandible, and I always add this custom abutment that is 20 millimeters long just to give me a visual reference of where a screw hole would be. Drop it into any view and then begin doing some initial positioning. And then I like to do my fine tuning in this tangential window. So this is another case. It looked great from the buccal. Here obviously it's out of bone, and so this is where we have to start doing the compromise between our restorative and our surgical positions. Okay, so if I go down there, that exclamation point tells me that I just got too close to the nerve. If I angle too much more this way, I'm going to really be fighting this dense cortical plate down here. And so let's see what that looks like as far as an emergence position. Now, if I'm doing a custom abutment, I'm pretty good with that. I would have no problem placing the implant in that position. However, another option that we could consider is we could go with a smaller implant. So if I right click and say replace, it'll bring the window back up, and I could change this to a 4.3 by 8. And let's see if that gives me any more leeway to correct the angulation. So now I can bring that a bit more upright. So again, I have no problem placing an 8 millimeter implant. That keeps me off the cortex. It keeps me in the cancellous bone. I'm not too close to the buccal. And I still have a very nice restorative profile if you look at this 3D rendering. So there's where my screw access hole is. So either one of those options would work, and it's up to you which one you would prefer. But once you like that, lock it. You can now turn the tooth off. Click on the tooth button up here, and now you're ready to make the surgical guide. First of all, though, before you make the surgical guide, you've got to turn on your guide tube. If you don't turn on a guide tube, you're just going to get a nice mouth guard. Now this looks like a great case for using the direct cut drills. I used the fully guided kit and the direct cut drills in my practice. Really liked both of them. There are certain scenarios where one can work better than the other. This one would work really well with either option. So with the direct cut drill approach, it's going to be a single drill It's going to be matched to this guide tube, and you're just going to drill in until your handpiece bottoms out on this drill stop, which is the green object. So let's just do a demo case with the direct cut drills. Now to the guide panel. We're building this on case 3 gingiva. Excuse me. We're going to lock the implants in virtual teeth, use the automatic brush. This is unique to the direct cut drills. We want the built-in drill stops. That is what controls our drilling depth, high on quality, mandible, and draw curve. So I push shift and left click and hold and begin drawing my outline. When I need to reorient the model, let go of shift, spin the model around, and continue on. Then come up and over, and then shift again, and back to where we started. Now edit the curve. That will bring up the nodes, which we could fine tune. But this looks pretty good. And now we're ready to create surgical guide. And I'm going to push the handpiece that I'm using. Since we are using these direct cut drills and the handpiece itself acts as the stop, you need to tell the software which handpiece you're using. So if you were using, say, a X-Cube or Sation handpiece, then you need to know that, because every handpiece swallows up a different amount of the drill, and you want to be able to set that appropriately. And here's the final guide. And you could emboss the text into it, but if you're ready to export this as is, you would go to File, Export Data. Obviously, you would need to have some exports already purchased. If you don't have any exports, those can be purchased right in the software, also in the File menu. And all I'm going to export, I'm going to uncheck everything except for the surgical guide. And once I do this, it'll take away one export. And I can save this to wherever. We'll call it that guide. And now it's deducted one export, and it has placed this onto my desktop as a guide file, which I could now 3D print in-house or do whatever I wanted to with it. So that is the end of case 3.